was in line to get on a plane to New Hampshire. The lady standing right next to me said, "You must be Pete." And I was like, "Why, yes, I am." Remind me, what network are you a reporter for?
We were trying to convince people to believe in this project.
And so with your help, telling friends, getting them to tell 10 friends.
I decided today I'm going to do 3 things for Pete.
I haven't supported or been as excited about a presidential campaign for President Obama.
We're in Iowa, we did it in New Hampshire. Tonight we're going to get on a plane to go to South Carolina, and I can tell the people are ready for a new vocabulary about our values.
Hey, doing it with your help.
I'm here to join you to make a little news. I'm a proud son of South Bend, Indiana, and I am running for President of the United States. Hurry up, we're having a little fun along the way. I'm so honored, so amazed to see everybody here. People get why it makes sense to have a voice from outside of Washington.
I'm all in.
People understand the virtue of a new generation that has so much on the line.
You are brilliant. Never stop.
People understand that ideas like freedom and security and family don't belong to one political party, they belong to all of us. And so I am absolutely counting on the grassroots folks here to get everybody else involved who we think shares these values, shares this vision, and benefit from a better life. This is not optimism based in naivete. This is optimism because we can't afford not to. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about the future of our country. This is what grassroots looks like. Let's get this done.
Hello, San Diego. My name is Andy McNew. I am a San Diegan, a proud veteran, and the founder and coordinator of San Diego for Pete. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out here today. Taking time out of your busy Sunday to see a presidential candidate is an act of hope. Yes, and I think most of you are here today for the same reason I am, because you believe that Mayor Pete is a better way forward for this country. So the first time I heard Mayor Pete was back in March on a podcast I really liked, and I couldn't believe it because here was someone that I had never heard of before, that was younger than me, saying the same things that I had been thinking and feeling for a long time, ever since I was a freshman at the Air Force Academy in a political science class where I was the only Democrat. Everyone else was a conservative, and it was me against the world in every class argument. And by the end, I was so frustrated that my final paper was angrily called "Why Liberals Deserve to Be in the Military." And we do, right? We do. So here was someone saying the same thing that I had tried so inartfully to argue in my freshman paper all those years ago. I won't say how many. And I had to know more. So I did the deep dive on the internet for podcasts, interviews, anything I could find about this mayor from South Bend, Indiana, who was running for president. And like many of you probably did, when I was done, I knew I had my candidate. So my next step, like any Gen Xer who wishes she was a millennial, I went to the internet to find friends. And there was no one in San Diego. So what I did was went ahead and started a Facebook group. And that Facebook group has grown. And it is now SanDiegoForPete.com. And I just want to take one step back and make sure that everyone in here is registered to vote. Are you registered to vote? Excellent. Now, who in here is registered to vote as a Democrat? I saw some hands not go up, and that's okay. You're probably no party preference. That's okay, we're all independent spirits here in California. But if you are no party preference, there's an extra step you need to take to be able to vote for Mayor Pete in the primary here in California. When you get a little card in the mail, if you vote by mail, you will need to check a box that says, yes, I want the Democratic primary ballot, and send it back. Now, if you're like me, you get that card and you toss it. Don't toss it. Make sure you check that box and send it back. Otherwise, you will not get a ballot with a Democratic primary on it. So, please do that. And if you missed that, that's okay. You can still go to sdvote.com and look up how to contact the registrar and request a Democratic ballot. So, is everybody gonna do that? Yeah. Yes. See how easy that was for me to get more Pete voters? Yeah. So, my last thing that I want to ask you to do is, if you are interested in helping Pete not just win the nomination and not just win the presidency, but win the era that comes next, that's right, we're gonna need your help. Everybody in this room. We are gonna need an army of volunteers because California is a really big place and there's no way that they can cover it with staff. So if you're interested in volunteering, please go to sandiegoforpete.com, sign up, tell us what you're interested in doing, and if you've never volunteered before, that's okay. You can come to one of our organizational meetings and we will show you the ropes. So, is everybody with me? Yeah. Are you with Mayor Pete? Good. And without further ado, it is my honor and privilege to introduce the next President of the United States, Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
So, when I was 17 years old, I had a guitar that I got for Christmas, and I used to play it all day in the basement of our house. And if you could have told me that 20 years later, I'd be on the stage at the House of Blues in San Diego, I would have been pretty excited. If you could have told me that I would have taken the stage at the age of 37 at the House of Blues the day after pulling into the lead in the Iowa caucuses for president, I definitely would not have believed it. We're feeling great energy on the ground there, but we're feeling amazing energy on the ground here in California too. And thanks for being part of it. I'm so thankful to be with you right now. I'm thankful for your encouragement, for your support, and for your attention to this moment that we will remember for the rest of our lives. It is a turning point in the life of this nation. Even now, we might be underreacting to just how important this moment is for the United States of America. And as I often do, I want to begin by asking you to paint a picture in your mind as specifically as you can, to think about how it's going to feel, what it's going to be like in this country the first time that the sun comes up over our nation and Donald Trump is no longer the president of the United States. Thank God! Picture it.
Thank God.
I think we can all agree that will be a very important step forward in this country.
Yeah.
And there's a kind of relief when you think about it, right? Just picturing that this flavor of chaos and corruption and criminality even, and the tweets, my God, the tweets, that we can put that behind us, right? But I'm not just asking you to picture that day to have something to look forward to. Yes, that day will come. One way or the other, that day is going to come. But also really think about what our country's going to need, what our country's going to be like on that day. Because the sun's going to come up over a country that will be even more divided, even more torn up over politics, exhausted from fighting than we are now. Just think of everything we've been through, and think of everything we are about to go through. And you can see what a tender moment in the life of this country that's going to be. And at the same time, something else will be true, which is that so many issues will be crying out for immediate, urgent, bold action. These issues aren't going to take a break for the impeachment process. They're going to be right there waiting for the next president. A climate that is rapidly approaching the point of no return. We're going to continue to be a nation on that day where kids are learning active shooter drills before they learn to read. We're going to be a country where the economy, even when it looks good on paper, even when the stock market is going up, leaves more and more Americans behind. And so you see what a tall order that's going to be for the next president. On one hand, got to be ready with bold solutions to deal with these big, big problems. And at the same time, got to figure out a way to do it that's actually going to unify the American people. I am running to be the president who can stand on the rubble at that moment, pick up the pieces, and bring all of us together to get something done. And the idea of my candidacy is that we don't have to choose one or the other, boldness or unifying. As a matter of fact, we got to do both. You can't skip a step. We have to be a unified nation, boldly moving forward to get things done, working side by side. That's what this campaign is about. So how do you do that? Well, it starts with our values. The values that we share as Americans. And some of them are the very same values that they're using now to pit us against each other. We got to take those values and unify around them to hold together an American majority ready to get something done. Take a basic American value like love of country, patriotism. But I'm not talking about the cheap nationalism of hugging the flag, literally, as this president has done. That's not what I'm talking about when I say love of country. I'm talking about a love of country that begins with the understanding that our country is made of people, and you cannot love a country if you hate half of the people in it. I'm talking about a respect for the flag built on an understanding of what that flag symbolizes, that it stands for something. It stands for rights. It stands for duty. That is why, for example, when somebody summons the courage to testify in Congress about official wrongdoing, that is an expression of loyalty to the republic for which it stands and deserves to be honored and celebrated and protected. Protecting our country means protecting those values. It means protecting our country's honor. Which is why when I am your commander-in-chief, no ally will ever have reason to question whether it is a good idea to trust your life to the credibility of the United States of America, because we will keep our word. But also protecting our country, that means protecting each other, and that starts right here at home. If we're serious about national security, if we're serious about protecting America, that means protecting America from white nationalist violence right here in the United States. It means seeing to it that the Second Amendment can no longer be twisted into an excuse to do nothing at all on gun violence when we know how many lives are on the line. Yes, protecting our country means protecting our future. That is why the time has come to rise and meet the challenge of global climate change, like the security challenge that it is, and the issue of our time. We can't wait any longer. So that's what patriotism and love of country means to me. Think about these values that could be unifying us. I've met a lot of folks here who are members of the clergy, who have a richer understanding of faith than the kind of faith that in Washington is being used to divide us against each other. When I talk about honoring faith, it starts by honoring the constitutional principle that this country belongs to people of every religion and no religion equally. And only in that spirit are we free to then arrive in the public square with whatever our personal convictions are. And I can offer to those who are guided by faith a White House where you won't have to scratch your head every time you see it on the news and ask yourself, whatever happened to I was hungry and you fed me? I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I'll leave the preaching to the professionals. I just had to get that off my chest. But you see how we could be building unity out of these values. It's the same with democracy. I'm not just talking about democracy as a system. I'm talking about democracy as a set of values. The belief that our country is well served when we're actually responding to the voices of the people in this country, when every vote is counted and every voter counts. That's why we cannot take sitting down the disaster of Citizens United and money in our politics, or accept districts drawn to where politicians pick out their voters when it's supposed to be the voters picking out politicians. I've gone so far as to suggest that our democracy needs to reform our Supreme Court before it turns into another partisan battlefield. And I'd even say, at risk of sounding, some people think I'm far out on this, but in a democracy, it might be appropriate for us to choose our nation's leader by just counting up all of the votes and giving it to the person who got the most votes, like we do in every other election in this country. It's only fair. These are our values. Values like freedom. But I'm not talking about the freedom that you can get by just cutting every regulation and tax you've ever seen. I'm not that interested in Amazon or FedEx having the freedom to not have to pay any federal income taxes at all. That's not the priority. I'm talking about the freedom to live a life of our choosing. And that depends very much on what we expect our government to do. And yes, sometimes that does mean getting government out of the way. Like getting government out of the business of telling women what their reproductive health care choices ought to be. Getting county clerks out of the business of telling you who you ought to marry based on their idea of their own religion. But then sometimes it means expecting that the public sector step up and deliver, because you can't have freedom if we don't provide the conditions of freedom. Freedom comes by way of services like education, which is why we need a Secretary of Education who supports teachers and believes in public education. And I believe the time has come to ensure that one way or the other, every single American has health care, because you're not free if you don't have coverage in this country. That's why we got to deliver Medicare for anybody who wants it and leave you free to decide when and whether you want it, so long as you get covered one way or the other. Values that bring us together as Americans. Values like equality, which is why it is so important that in our lifetime we put an end to systemic racism and are not afraid to use resources to do it, because it's not going to happen on its own. That's what the Douglas Plan is all about. Values like decency, which is one of the reasons why we need to see to it, leading from the top, that it is as normal to talk about and treat mental health and addiction in this country as it is physical conditions, and require that there be parity to make sure it happens. We know what we're up against as a country, but we also know the possibilities of this country to move us all together. But it means insisting on a response to the crisis of belonging that I believe is dragging down our entire nation. I know this doesn't sound like a policy issue, but it might be the most important thing of all. Everybody is being told, so many of us in so many different ways, you don't belong, you don't fit. That wall the president's talking about is never going to be built, but very real fences of exclusion are being built around us and between us, even in our families as we're getting ready for Thanksgiving dinner. We can feel it. We got to do something about that. And that is part of what the presidency can do. I'm offering you a presidency that actually lets you know that you belong. In addition to a presidency where when you turn on the news and see the White House, you feel your blood pressure go down a little bit instead of up through the roof. I have faith that we can build up that sense of belonging because I felt it in so many different ways, even amid the bleak moments that we've been through as a country. I felt it the first time I arrived in San Diego for Navy training and got to know people of radically different beliefs and trust each other as we were part of something together. I saw it in my own community when we responded to the news articles at the beginning of this decade that told us we were dying by coming together, working side by side, and breathing new life into parts of our community that had been left for dead. I've seen it, and you're seeing it too. I know that hope is a little bit unfashionable right now in politics because of everything we're up against, but I know what this country can do when and only when we insist that belonging grow in this country, because you're looking at a living example of it. Frankly, the idea that I would be standing on the stage of the House of Blues 20 years after picking up my first guitar and not much better at it than I am now then. But that is less exotic than the idea that that same person picking at a guitar in his parents' basement, largely because he wasn't sure exactly whether or where he belonged outside, would be standing in front of you, a veteran, happily married, to a wonderful husband, running for president of the United States. Think about what that means. Think about the progress we can make together. Leadership matters.
Yes.
Leadership can build that up and bring it out of us. And I believe that's what the presidency is for. The purpose of the presidency. Not to glorify the president, but to unify and empower the people with a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose as we move forward. That is why I'm asking for your support for the presidency. And that's what I'm asking you to be part of, and that's why I'm so thankful to have your support. Now, thank you. So, as our gatherings have grown, I realize it's still so important that we not just have it be a monologue, but a conversation. So we've gathered up questions from folks here, and to be your voice and moderate the conversation, I want you to welcome a friend of the campaign. Liliana Gonzalez is joining us with the famous fishbowl, and she's going to share some of the questions from the audience.
That would have been nice. Huh? I saw them doing that. Were you allowed
to? Part of the San Diego Steering Committee. And my son is also working for Mayor Pete in Iowa, and he inspired me to look at Mayor Pete, and we so align with his values and the message that he brings. Let's unite to work in San Diego. Now here are some of your questions. What people will be part of your cabinet, or who would you recruit?
Great question. Other duties as assigned for our West Coast investment leader. Thank you, Dan. So several things are so important in building a cabinet and building a top team in the administration. And I've learned a lot about this from the kind of leadership team I set up as mayor. By the way, if it's your question, give a shout so I'm looking in the right direction. I see, oh, there you are, thank you. So, first of all, I want a cabinet that reflects the American people, that reflects the diversity of backgrounds and experience and thinking. And by the way, that means a cabinet that is at least 50% women, because the country is. Not just because that's the fair thing to do, but because we'll make better decisions. There's so much evidence for that. Second thing is, I never want to be the smartest person in the room on any particular subject. So I'm looking for people who know what they're doing. And I'm not afraid to be surrounded by people who know more than I do. You do not want me to know more than the Secretary of Energy about nuclear issues, for example. So we're going to find people who know what they're doing. We're going to find people who embody the values of the administration, which are going to be so similar to the values of the campaign. That there's a sense of respect, that there's a commitment to truth. Because what you need, and this is the most important quality of all, is people who are ready to tell you the truth. Especially when you don't want to hear it. And especially when they don't agree with each other, because that is when you earn your paycheck. In a job like president or mayor, when you're in charge, you've got to listen to people you trust and respect who know more about something than you do, who don't agree with each other, and then work out what the right way forward is. And in order to have that kind of teamwork, we have to have a ground commitment to always telling the truth as we see it. That's the kind of cabinet I'm going to give you. And one more thing, because personnel is policy, you're going to get people who actually believe in the mission of the departments that they lead. Look for somebody in charge of environmental protection who believes in climate science. Look for an attorney general who understands that she or he is the attorney of the American people, not the American president. And one more time, a Secretary of Education who cares about public education.
Your first act as president.
Ah, all right. Sir. Hi. Well, there's a lot of executive orders that are going to have to be undone right away. And several major policy areas that need immediate attention. One of them is the system itself, making our democracy stronger, because that's the issue that touches how we deal with all of the other issues. So right away, making sure that we are tearing down any barrier towards people voting or having their votes counted, looking ahead to the next election. That's critical. Immediate action on climate change, because that is an existential issue that requires work right away. And immediate action on economic inequality in this country, because we cannot go on like we are and expect things to get better. Those are some of the things that will be top of mind. But also as much as we can do to bring this country together. And don't get me wrong, we're not going to all agree. That's not the point. We're not going to water down our values or pretend we don't have major differences, but to remind each other that we are part of the same country. And I'm going to encourage people to reach out to someone they love, someone they know, who views politics differently than they do, to not talk about politics, but why we appreciate each other, to try to build something by way of common experience and a common touchstone for everything we're going to have to go through as a country.
Mayor Pete, will you do me a favor? Please talk about the people who keep you grounded, focused, and humble.
Great question. Great question. Hi, thanks for that. So, running for president is a bit of a strange thing to do to your own experience of the world, right? And being grounded is perhaps the most important and the most difficult thing to do. Because you go to bed and you wake up and people are talking about you on television, and it can have a strange effect on you to see people with t-shirts with your name on them. It's encouraging. I'm not complaining. But you got to remember who you are. You got to remember not to take the good or the bad personally. And you got to remember to stay true to your values. So there are friends in my life who would tell me, not only always encourage me, but also wouldn't be afraid to point out if they thought I was doing something or saying something that didn't seem like me. And I have the most amazing, amazing husband. Sounds like some of you have heard of Chaska. And we had a lot of conversations and had some real gut checks before making the decision to run. And at the end of the day, he supports me, he loves me. He said, but if we're gonna do this, you gotta promise me that we're always gonna be true to ourselves and that we're gonna find some way to have fun and find joy along the way. And every day he reminds me in some way of that. And having that, just remembering what's more important than winning, I think is the best way to make sure that you deserve to win and are capable of winning. And knowing that there's somebody who will care about me the very same, whether I'm the President of the United States or whether I'm pursuing my blues career that never took off. And it also helps to have, I guess your question is about people in my life, but I have two creatures in my life, Truman and Buddy, who do not care whether I'm the President of the United States or not. They just want to know they're going to get their treats and they're going to get their walk, and that can have a pretty good grounding effect too. Thanks.
And our last question. How would you address net neutrality? Does it require legislation, or can it be addressed via executive order or regulations implemented by the executive branch?
Okay, great question. And there are a lot of questions that actually take on this same contour. So specific to net neutrality, first of all, my appointees to the FCC would understand the importance of net neutrality, and that would help. But
Thank you.
I do believe that this is going to require legislation in the long run. We cannot allow things as important as net neutrality or dealing with climate or the right to choose to be subject only to the whim of a president or to what's going on in the judiciary without making sure we have legislation too. Now, sometimes I get a question of how we're actually going to do that, which is a fair question because so much depends on actually getting something done. That means getting something through Congress. So it's important for us to remember that the things we're proposing to do command the support of the American people. You wouldn't know it sometimes. Democrats have gotten so used to being in a defensive crouch that you might forget that our positions on issues from telecommunications and net neutrality and regulating big tech and doing the right thing with data privacy in this country to basic things around the minimum wage and paid family leave and immigration reform and even areas we used to be on defense like guns. The American people are with us. We have a majority for this if we can hold it together. And we can hold it together if we insist on a unifying message. And one thing I'm looking forward to is, when necessary, in the event that a member of Congress is standing in the way of one of these ideas that is not just the right thing to do, but also commands the support of the American people, is to take that big airplane that comes with the Oval Office and fly it into the home district of a member who's getting into the way of things that even in conservative areas people understand is needed, remind their voters about what's at stake, and see if that doesn't reawaken their sense of conscience. And if not, then we'll vote them out. One more thank you to Liliana for being your voice. Now, you're hearing a lot about Iowa right now. And it's good, it's good. A lot about New Hampshire. A lot about South Carolina and Nevada, the famous four early states. But I want to make sure no one here has any doubt about the fact that California is an early state as well. The voting here, the vote by mail, the early vote, that begins right around the same time as the Iowa caucuses. So California has a thumb on the scale in deciding what the future, what the nomination, and therefore the future of the country is going to be. And I need your help. I need you to self-organize and work with our campaign organization to help spread the word, to reach out as broadly and widely as possible to the most diverse coalition that we can draw in, to people who maybe have given up on politics altogether, and bring them in, not just ask them to help the campaign, but make sure that they see themselves in the campaign and make sure that they have a chance to shape this campaign. Because those votes are going to be on us before we know it. And the power that lies in the people in this room, more people than I will ever get a chance to meet, could be touched by the people in this room reaching out in your social networks to the kind of folks who don't hit refresh on Twitter all the time or check CNN every hour to see what's going on in the early states, but who have so much to gain and so much to lose by the decisions that are being made in big white buildings in Washington, D.C. that reach out into our workplaces, that reach into our homes, that reach into our marriages. So the question is, can I count on you to reach out to everybody that you know and pull them in to this effort? And know that when you are doing that, you're doing more than just helping a campaign. You are spreading hope. I've been reflecting a lot on something that I noticed in articles, which is that they took the word hopeful, and you notice this? They made it into a noun, and they use it as another word for candidate. Like, I'm a presidential hopeful. That's another word for somebody running for office. And how fitting, because running for office is an act of hope. You can't do it unless you believe it's going to make a difference. Unless you care who has their hands on the pulleys and levers of our government and believe that if we have the right values and the right people in there, that it's going to make our lives better. And so when you do this, when you're part of an event like this, when you reach out to a friend, when you knock on a door, when you go in and vote, you are spreading the sense of hope that is required to get anything at all done in the life of this nation. And my hope is that we are all going to be able to be reunited with kids that I meet on campaign events right now, who I have a hard time looking in the eye sometimes when they ask me, what are we doing to keep them physically safe from gun violence? What are we doing to make sure the climate is one where they can thrive? What are we doing to make sure that they can count on a better life than we have, just as generations of Americans have been able to count on for decades and centuries? I don't have the best answer for them right now about how things got to where they are right now. But imagine being able to run into them again in a few short years and say, okay, sorry things got to the way they were. On behalf of all adults, I'm sorry about how things got to by 2019. But look at what we did together in 2020 to make sure that you were on path for a better life. That is the hope that propels me. Are you ready to spread that sense of hope to everybody you know? And are you ready to turn the page to a better day for this country? Friends, we are making history, and with your help, I will become the next president of the United States. We will make history together, and I will work every day to make you proud. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support, and I will see you on the campaign trail. Thank you.